Hey everybody. Today I'll be talking about Vinland Saga. Yes, I'm sure all my anime fans out there have at least heard of this one. Came out a couple years ago. The first season came out a couple years ago. Second season came out this year. And I've watched all of season one, and I'm about halfway, a little over halfway through season two. Uh, and wow, like, I've got to say, I am very impressed. When I first heard about Vinland Saga, I said to myself, here we go. Another show about white folks in medieval times doing stuff that medieval white folks do. It's like, oh man. It's like the fiction landscape of American media is just filled to the brim, overflowing with those type of stories. So I definitely I definitely dismissed it when I first heard about it. I even watched a video by Gigook saying like don't sleep on Vinland Saga, and I was like, meh. I watched the video and I was still like, whatever, I'm not watching this. But yeah. Uh seeing first I got into it by seeing that Claire was watching it, and just kind of she was watching it on her own, and so I saw bits and pieces of it as I was doing other stuff. And I said, "Wow, this kind of looks really interesting." It gets into some philosophical stuff, and to the point where I will say, you know, you don't usually go into anime expecting to hear Bible verses, but definitely on multiple multiplications, definitely on multiple occasions, there are Bible scriptures read directly in the show, and there's definitely strong themes that connect with the way of Jesus, and it's kind of a takedown of, as you say, the myth of, as they say, the myth of redemptive violence. Like, it really looks at violence in a critical way and shows, unlike most, shows that highlight the coolness and the excitement of violence, this one really shows it has a lot of very violent scenes, but it's not played for just excitement. I mean, there are some exciting points, and I see the creators kind of toe that line, but it really highlights the horror and brutality of war, of conquest, of these political games that men have played over centuries and millennia. And wow, it's really fascinating. Um, so Vinland Saga tells the story of um, Thorfinn, a young man named Thorfinn, and his journey. He's from Iceland, and he interacts with Vikings, with Nordic men, and uh, uh, Nordic men who are pirates, raiders, and also military folks during the time when Denmark was at war with England and Denmark was trying to conquer England. That's the main focus of the first season. Well, it's the backdrop of the second season as well, but it's the main focus of the first season. And it tells his story of someone bent on revenge from a very young age, and shows like what he goes through in order to get that revenge. And the story continues on. um well, I won't say that because I'm going to have a spoiler free version or portion. I'm going to have a spoiler portion of this review, and this is the spoiler free portion, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But wow, so what else can I say that's not spoilery? The animation, excellent, absolutely excellent. Um, even one of the one of the complaints I used to hear people growing up is like, oh, anime, they have generic faces and these like big weird eyes and stuff. With this, you know, the eyes are in proportion in this, and there's definitely characters with distinctive faces. It's very, it's not a typical anime in the art style, but there are still hallmarks that represent the excellence that Japanese animation is known for, and certainly the richness of the storytelling and the philosophical elements that are delved into during the show. Music is also excellent. Wow, it's just from beautiful to haunting. I give the music high marks. Let's see. Also, yeah, so I'll leave it at that. The That's a spoiler free portion. So go out and watch it. I recommend it. Now here's the spoiler portion. So I found out, as some of you might already know, that Vinland Saga is actually the name of a, or Vinland Saga is the popular name of two different Nordic sagas that, were written, hundreds of years ago. And these are two sagas that focus on the life of Thorfinn Karlsefni, I think that's his last name, who was the man who he and his group were the first Europeans to create a settlement in North America. He wasn't the first European to land on American soil. I think that was Leif Erikson. Thorfinn was part of the first group that tried to make a uh, colony or settlement, and the settlement did fail, and they did return to Iceland, I believe. But the Vinland Saga anime is like a dramatization of Thorfinn's story. So that right there, as soon as I found out that Thorfinn Karlsefni was a real person, that really intrigued me as a history buff. And yeah, it shows him, he unfortunately sees his father die a brutal death at the hands of Vikings. And he finds out actually that his father was a fearsome, renowned Viking warrior in the past who gave up that life of violence, and eventually gets to the point where he develops this philosophy he shares with his son, where, in his words, no one has any enemies, that no one deserves to get hurt. And that's powerful. That's very intense uh, concept of pacifism. And of course, Thorfinn can't accept this. I mean, he's a Nordic youth. He's been raised on stories of warriors and glory of Valhalla for men who, or people rather, who die in battle. Uh, Among the Vikings, there were some women who became warriors as well. That was allowed. If a woman could fight as well as a man, she could be a warrior. I haven't seen any women warriors in the Vinland Saga anime, but I know historically that was a part of the Nordic cultures back then. Um, yeah, so at the age of 5, he sees his father murdered, and he attempts to take revenge on the man who murdered him, whose name is Askeladd, and he's the leader of a Viking troop, a group of pirates essentially, and he kind of stows aboard a ship in order to kill Askeladd. But when he gets the chance to sneak up on him while he's asleep and kill him, he doesn't. He hesitates and he doesn't want to do that. He wants to fight him in a duel, and as a 5-year-old kid, he challenges Askeladd to a duel, and as you expect, gets beaten pretty soundly. But he stays around and continues to follow him, even into battles, um, because Askeladd says, "Hey, if you want another match at me, you need to prove yourself in battle." So this is what Thorfinn does for 11 years. He follows Askeladd around. He performs enough feats in battle for Askeladd to allow him to have a duel with him, and he essentially becomes Askeladd's pawn, and even in some cases, more than a pawn, I guess, but always a tool for Askeladd to use to advance his goals. So yeah, this goes on for 11 years, and until Askeladd gets caught up in some political uh not espionage isn't the right word. Uh Dang. Political intrigue, I think that's the right word. Yeah. He gets caught up in some political intrigue. He tries to he makes a move into politics more directly, and he gets caught in a situation where he basically has to forfeit his life in order to achieve his goal, and he ends up fighting down he ends up fighting against dozens of men and is finally finished off by the Prince of Denmark. So killing him before Thorfinn gets a chance to kill him. And after this, Thorfinn he loses his shit in the moment and tries to kill the prince. And after that, he's just set adrift. His punishment is that he becomes a slave, and he becomes, as he describes later, an empty man. And so that's where season 2 picks up. You find out a few episodes in that he's become a slave. But season 2 starts with a man named Einar, who's just a regular peasant farmer in England, and when his village gets raided by Vikings, and his mother is killed, and he is taken captive by the Vikings and becomes a slave, and the person who purchases him is a very wealthy farmer named Kettle, and Kettle also owns Thorfinn, and they sets them on this project of converting a forest into a field. So yeah, it's fascinating. I never thought I would see the simple life and the laborious tasks of an enslaved person is so interesting. I mean, I don't know, the way the creators of this anime developed everything, it really like engages you, and you're like, man, what's gonna happen next in their process of converting this field? Uh, because this season does have its share of action, its violent scenes. Once again, always to illustrate the horror of violence as opposed to glorifying violence. So season 2 has a few scenes of that, but it's way less than in season 1, which season 1 you could definitely describe it as like an action anime, and there is there's definitely some scenes that really clearly show brutality, but then there are other scenes that show the cool part of violence, of the cool part of war and battles. And there is, on one hand, you could see that as kind of um exploitative or sneaky by the creators to kind of try to, okay, we want to make this show that shows the horror of violence, but we're still gonna use the thrill factor of violence to excite people and stuff like that. We're gonna make that an appeal of the show. So maybe there's a little bit of that, but on the other hand, I feel like there's some honesty to it. I mean, you wouldn't have martial arts if there wasn't a artistry that could be born from violence, if that makes any sense. Like there's a reason why violence appeals to certain people, and yes, in our media it's definitely a glorified version of violence, what we see on TV and movies. However, you know, I would be surprised if in real life war, at least back then, I'd be surprised if there was really truly nothing exciting or fascinating or even in a dark way artistic about the way warriors engage with each other, combat and warfare. I can't help but suspect there's an appeal to that other than the pure concept of destruction, other than the pure concept of someone enjoying having power over others, or someone enjoying uh, hurting others. I think it's kind of some might say is obvious, but some would wouldn't like it. But I think that it maybe it's an element of realness for them to show the exciting and alluring part of violence while also showing the horror and essentially condemning violence. So, yeah, long story short, there's a lot of cool action scenes in the first season. Thorfinn becomes a skilled dual knife wielding fighter, and he comes across people like the giant Thorkill. There's a lot of people with Thor in their name in this show. I don't know how realistic that is, but yeah, the jolly, sadistic giant Thorkill who, you know, swings around two big axes in battle and throws sharpened logs at people. He's a literally larger than life character, and he's someone that Thorfinn fights. And of course, you have Askeladd, who's a skilled fighter himself, and some of the people. I'm forgetting the guy's name, but Askeladd's right hand man is an interesting character who, from time to time, will take these berserker mushrooms and just go nuts in on the battlefield. Um, yeah. So season one had a lot of that. With season two, there was some scenes of violence, but it does focus more on like what was a life of a slave like in 1000 in the 1000s AD, in Denmark, in the Nordic world. And yeah, I mean, the richness and depths of the characters are so fascinating. I mean, the passion of the voice actors. Whew. Season two is no slouch in the animation, that's for sure. And yeah, just every character, almost all the characters have depth. There's very few one-dimensional characters. Every character, every major character, certainly you see the motivations and the drives behind what they do and why they're the way they are. And the last episode I saw, spoiler alert, was the episode where um, where Thorfinn and Einar work with Old Master Sverkel to help the escape of the slave Arnheid and her escaped slave husband Garter. And oh man, this episode had me on the edge of my seat. Um, man, like not only seeing the fight between Snake, the leader of the guests, the guards who protect Kettle's farm, uh, he ends up having a fight with Thorfinn. He ends up discovering their plot and confronting the group, trying to help Arnheid and Garter escape. And Thorfinn is the only one standing in his way from getting to Garter. And excuse me, they have this battle, and there's this really poignant, tense moment where Thorfinn is thinking, "Oh man, what am I gonna do?" A few episodes earlier, he said he swore off violence. He said, I'm never gonna hurt anyone ever again." But here he finds himself in a situation where, it just seems like the right thing to do is to use at least some force against Snake in order to prevent him from killing someone, from killing an escaped enslaved person, and from thwarting the escape of an enslaved woman who would otherwise be trapped as a handmaid for the rest of her life, and also the um, mistress, might be generous, sexual plaything of the owner of the farm. And it's played that Kettle is this, sensitive, nice guy. I mean, it's suppose he is nice for his slave master, I guess you could say. But at the same time, he's cheating on his wife with this much younger enslaved woman. And how can you have consent when you're someone's prisoner? Um, so it is, yeah. So it definitely seems like the right thing to do in that moment is to fight Snake. And he does end up, essentially, it says end up fighting Snake unhanded. Um, sorry. He ends up fighting Snake unarmed. Um, and he does seem like he doesn't want to kill Snake. He doesn't want to hurt him as much as possible. But Snake outmaneuvers him and gets to Garter. But he stabs Garter, but that just wakes him up, and your boy Garter just yokes him up, like starts to choke him out, from behind. And yeah, that was crazy. But they finally get Garter to let Snake go. And then Arnhide and Garter ride off as far as they can go before Garter passes away. And the guards reach them both. But they had a few moments of freedom together again. And just blows me away. I mean, honestly, and I do not say this very often, I'm thinking this is one of the best anime series I've ever seen. I'm a big anime fan. I don't know if anything will ever unseat Fullmetal Alchemist from my heart. One Piece is also very high up there in terms of some of my favorite anime. Ghost in the Shell. Uh, but yeah, now Vinland Saga is way up there. And it's so ironic. I never would have guessed. Um, because, one of my main reasons for watching anime is to get away from the constant saturation of European uh, European descent characters in especially action fiction, science fiction, fantasy, especially fantasy. Oh my gosh. So I like to that's part of the appeal of anime is like, okay, I can watch something from a different culture, and they will do science fiction, fantasy stories. And of course, there's anime of every genre, but I'm attracted mostly to this science fiction and fantasy genres within anime. So, but they will do that with their cultural backdrop, and it's, you know, I find a lot about Japanese culture fascinating, and also, they even when they make a fantasy setting, it's colored by their perspective, which is different from what you get from something American, British, Canadian, etc. So it's just ironic that that's one of the reasons why I watch anime. Yet this show set in Europe, face all about Europeans, has like won over my heart. Because man, I love peace and I love me some Jesus, and a show that you know, highlights the importance of peace and the power of scripture and God and things of that nature. It's yeah, that's gonna get my attention. Oh man, I might have to make another episode specifically about Canute and yeah, his kind of awakening moment, which I found interesting and disturbing at the same time. Uh, but yeah, for now, that is my review of Vinland Saga, season 1 and half of season 2. All right. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe. I hope to have more videos coming in the coming months, weeks, maybe. So, yeah, I hope you like this. Comment, let me know what you think.